Thank you very much. I have to say this is an honor and a real pleasure to be here at Bentley University. And I can tell you how great Bentley is, not having attended here, but I will say that my brother, a brilliant professor, Jason Taylor, taught physics and calculus here, and it continues to prove to be one of the great experiences in his life. So I want to thank Adam Payne, I want to thank Bentley, and I want to thank all of you for attending. And I'll try not to make this too pedantic so that you don't feel you're sitting in class and have to, adhere to a lecture. First, let me say, I'm going to tell you what this isn't. This isn't a motivational speech, or I've given those, or an inspirational speech. I would assume you're all motivated or you wouldn't be here. So I'm not going to try to empower you, because I'm hoping you can use this information to self-empower yourself. And when you look at the university environment, and I will keep this apolitical, when you look at the university environment, it's been the battle since the days of the feudal system with the academic and the businessman. You see that going on today. You see it going on in politics. You're seeing it go on in the business world. And if I'm invited back, I can talk about that in the next presentation. But it's an ongoing battle. And I want to tell you about one event that happened with me with a major university in this country, a well-known institution, but I can't mention the university. The acting president took me to lunch and said, "Stu, can you give me some advice? We have a new president coming in, and how would you qualify this individual as being appropriate for the new presidency of this university?" And I said, "First of all, I appreciate you asking me that question, and I will give you two bits of advice. One is, get him or get her out in the golf course, or get them in some casual environment, because we're all at our best in a situation that's structured. I mean, we all have flaws, but I won't see any of your flaws, and other than speaking flaws or presentation flaws, you may not see any of mine. But the real truth is, when you really get to know someone, you get them in a situation where you disarm them and you disengage them and you get into conversation. And boy, I'll tell you, it's amazing what people will say and how you can really read a person." So I said, that's suggestion number one. Suggestion number two, it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican, come in, or a Democrat or an independent. Make absolutely certain that the individual whom you bring in here doesn't have a bias against business. Because there's a lot of that going on, and Bentley is an institution, I think, that is a middle-of-the-road institution. Are you all business majors? Then you'll appreciate that, because what's the sense of a university having an academic posture only and not understanding what goes on in the real world? And that's why I'm here today. I'm here for three things to hopefully I can do that I can accomplish for you, or you can accomplish from listening. One is, I assume you're going to be concerned about the work environment when you get out. How do I get a job? Number two, how do I make money? Well, we can all talk about the aesthetics in life and the intuitive things that you look for and satisfaction. We do have to survive. We live in a pragmatic society. And number three, and this is equally important, how am I self-fulfilled? Am I just going to go to work for 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day and come home and get up and pass the time? It's no way really to live a life. You should emphatically enjoy as much as you can and do whatever you can. Because if you don't know where you're going, all roads will take you to the same place. Or if you have a dumb business model for your life, you're going to end up paying the consequences. It's a Halloween joke I just thought of, but it's about two guys who decide to go into the pumpkin business at Halloween, and they buy 1,000 pumpkins, and they buy them for $1 a piece. And they decide to set up a roadside stand, and they're going to sell them for $1 a piece. And they sell it in an hour. 1,000 pumpkins, and one guy turns to the other and says, "Look how successful this business venture is." And the other guy said, "I told you we should have bought more pumpkins." You can have a model like that may not work. So what kind of a business model should you have? And how should you progress in life? This isn't going to be about me, but it's going to be about things that I've done. You're all individuals, and you'll all have your own business styles and your own business models. But I think if I can relate to you what I've done and how to use certain techniques, you can apply it to what you're going to do in life. It's important that you do that. Be individualized. You can self-achieve. Each and every one of us have these opportunities. And I just want to tell you, I'm providing these books for you as a gift. One of them is on career building from Career Builder. It'll give you some good pragmatic advice, you know, the kind of boring stuff that hopefully you won't hear today. And the other one is a story about a lot of people who have overcome different obstacles in life. I have one chapter in there. It'll just give you a little idea what I have in there. And I was fortunate, along with Jerry Lucas, who played for the old Cincinnati Royals in the NBA, and Dr. Wayne Dwyer. We were guests of the book. They asked us if we could be included. And then there's a sheet here. And this sheet will just give you some ideas. At first, I was going to parallel it with some of the stories and the achievements that I've had. And then I realized it's all really interconnected. You know, everything is really connected to everything else, and that's a key word here, and that's linkage. How do I connect to another opportunity and spot opportunities in life? You know, Thomas Edison once said that opportunity, a success, is difficult to spot because it's often dressed in overalls and looks like work. Never underestimate anyone, or never underestimate any business opportunities out there. Somerset Maugham, the great screenwriter, said, the opportunities out there exist, and if you can't spot them, create them. And I know you're still going through these formative years in college, but I will tell you on a practical note and on a non-inspirational note, you're really dealing with an extraordinarily difficult business environment out there. That doesn't mean you should be pessimistic. It means you should be optimistic. But it isn't easy. And you have to define who you are before you pursue your objectives. I know when I started out, it was electrical engineering. I hated it. I didn't want to do it, but my brother went to MIT, and I felt the pressure. Everybody was in engineering, so I just did it. And I hated it. And after the first year, I transferred it into experimental psychology. Now I'm a practicing psychiatrist. No. But it was and I learned it at an early age. And the thing is, don't fool yourselves. Be honest with yourself. I was honest with myself, and I will tell you, in having mentors, have those great mentors. My great mentors were my parents. They really were. I mean, I admire a lot of people I've had on my radio shows, a lot of people with name brand recognition, but my parents brought me up with a great work ethic. My father was born in Maine. He came down here as a kid, didn't know what to do, barely graduated high school. You know what they taught in his high school? His math teacher was his football coach. And he'd do this. He'd go to the door, and he'd close the door to make sure none of the faculty was there. And he said, hey, listen, guys, if you carry the ball 3 times and gain 3 1/3 yards each time, you'll have a first down. See, he's telling a story. This is the analogy of football to how you count. I mean, this is pretty basic. You know, 3 1/3 times 3 still is 10. That hasn't changed. But these were great lessons for him, and he came to Boston, and he had a fascinating story with no money and no opportunities. He took odd jobs, moving furniture, whatever he could do. He grew up in the Depression. And one day he was walking down the street, and he overheard a conversation in a store. Some guy had just sold the contents of a store to some young guy, and they negotiated it, and they shook hands on the deal. And after the deal was made, the guy who bought the contents of the store said, you know, I don't really like the deal I just made. When you make a deal, you stick to your deal. When you value your ethics in life and in your code of morality, nothing can supplant it, because you can spend your whole life building your reputation and lose it in 15 seconds. I have a saying in my book, I'll talk about it. The only lie that will ever net you $1 is the lie you don't tell. You can spend your whole life building character and blow it in 15 seconds. You see it on television all the time, because we live in a survival reality show world, an entertainment world. Can't lose our ethics. We can't lose our values. And I learned early on from my father. He was in what was called the closeout business. He would walk into businesses. Well, I didn't finish this. Let me finish this first. My father was outside, and he said, kid, come in here for a second. You want the contents of this store, and I'll give it to you for half the price I sold it to him. And my father said, I don't have any money. He said, I'll loan you the money, and you can pay me back when you can. He said, how do you know? He says, I'm going to take a chance on you. My father bought the contents. And he went out and he sold it, and he brought the guy his money, and he ended up building that business. And I went out with him in those early days, and he taught me a tremendous amount. One lesson was, Stu, when you go into a room, and we'd go into a room at various businesses and factories, and he would bid for it and say, I'll give you 500 or 1,000 for the room. It's amazing how I caught on to that. But you know what he taught me, and this should be a metaphor in life. Look at what can bring you back your money. Think about this. And the rest is gravy. I want you to think about that. That will require some thought. And he said, beware of partnerships in business. All partnerships are not good. That doesn't mean that all partnerships are bad. If 1 and 1 equals 3, if you and I go into business together and we can bring back 3 or 4 times rather than twice the value, and we complement each other, it can be a good partnership. I said, so early to talk about partnerships, but it's important to realize it. You know when I realized it? When I graduated, I got a job with a company called Teaching Systems Corporation. Anybody familiar with programmed instruction, Skinnerian learning, conditioning? You repeat something until you learn it. Well, that's what I did. I was a writer, and I really wanted to consult. I was desperate to consult, and I could talk back then. But I worked for 2 Harvard Business School guys with IQs of 160, and they weren't about to let a young guy like me go out. So I went to California, and on my own vacation time, I made presentations at Max Factor, Union Oil, and Carnation. I came back, and I said, Dick, look what I did on my own time. Look at that. I've got 3 companies interested. And he said, thanks, Stu. He never did anything. You know what I did? I said, I've had it. I'm never working for anyone again. I'm never, ever going to. It doesn't mean it's a formula for all of you. Both of my daughters work in industry. One for Condé Nast Traveler, the director of merchandising. The other one is getting her MBA at the University of Chicago. And she has a job in pricing analysis. It's not for everyone, and it may be different today. But let me not dwell on that. So, with my father's experience, with the experience I had with my father, and after having quit that job, I decided to get into a similar business. This was way back. And by the way, I'm going to change the nature of this a little bit because it may extend beyond 40 minutes. So if anybody has any questions, because I'm going to be feeding so much information out here, you can just interrupt and ask me the question. And then we can have a Q&A at the end, and please ask me questions. Please take advantage of this opportunity. So I decided to get after starting out small and working with a local famous Boston artist, Bob Kennedy, not related to the other Kennedys, and distributing his products, buying them, warehousing them, and selling them. I learned a tremendous amount about everything, about people, buying, selling, marketing, innovation, collaboration, all of these things that actually fit into the scope of a comprehensive business model for everyone. And here, you'll see, I think I have it somewhere here. Listen to what people are saying. And when you start hearing things more than once, twice, or 3 times, take heed. I decided after hearing from someone who owned a gift shop in Cape Cod that all the fads back when, and I know these may be distant, not even memories because none of you were around back then, but they're still great examples. It's just like my book is timeless with 24 business principles. Some things are timeless. I said, Stu, the fads are coming from the west to the east. This is way back when in the dark ages, posters and incense and all the printed t-shirts. It started way back when. And I decided, instead of being a local person, I think I'll go to the West Coast and start it. Nobody did it. And I had a small business and I bought a building and I started to bring all of these trends back. Nobody had ever seen them. And the only way they saw them was if they were manufacturers' representatives. I'm trying to not get off on another subject. A manufacturer's representative represents companies. They write orders, they send them to the company, and the company pays them a commission. A distributor buys product, stores it in his warehouse or her warehouse, sets up sales reps who work for me around the country, and I had 180 of them after a while, and 35 people inside. It's amazing, I'm still in good shape. You want to talk about pressure? Every single day, when is this going to end? These fads that come and go, and how much inventory do I have? So I decided to bring those fads east. And before I knew it, something amazing happened. Remember, do you remember Saturday Night Fever and John Travolta? You weren't here, but are you all familiar with it? You realize how big disco was. Well, back then, I had a representative who sold for me in New York, and he had said to me, do you want to sell Elvis Presley posters? I said, yeah, what do I know? And before I knew it, when Elvis died, I got posters that were legal to sell, and I sold thousands and thousands of them before the rights were bought by the colonel who represented him, and I had to cease distribution of selling them, and I paid the people who supplied me. The next story I'm going to tell you may be the most important story of this whole talk. I did so well, the owners of the company called Jim Lahue, my rep, and said, "Do you think Stu would be interested in Saturday Night Fever?" Well, I was thinking Saturday Night Live. Who knew? And I got a call, and I said, "Listen, we'll take care of everything. Well, they knew that I bought a lot of posters and paid. They flew me to New York, and I saw the first uncut, unedited version of Saturday Night Fever at the Gulf Western building. I was blown away. It was unedited. It was 3 hours with the Bee Gees and all those songs. Have you all seen Saturday Night Fever? It was an amazing movie. And on the way back to a restaurant, my mind was so active. How do I get this? How do I get this for New England? I remember being tense, and I started to think, Marlon Brando, The Wild One. These are all old superstars. George Chakiris, West Side Story. I think John Travolta is going to be the next cult hero. I just know it in my blood he's going to be. And you really shouldn't make those kind of mistakes, because the only thing you should be married to is your mate in life. Don't marry your business. It can be very dangerous. But the passion overcame me. We went to Mario's restaurant on 19th Street. And I'm sitting there thinking, how do I impress these people? And I had a lot of energy. I still have some energy, but I had a lot of energy. And I kind of got them to really like me, connect and get people to like you, but do it naturally and don't expect anything back. That's an important lesson in life. If I want to do something for you, I'll do it because I want to do it, not because I'm expecting something back. Do you know what I want back from this talk? I want somebody to say to me or email me or contact me and say I learned something. That's all I want. That's what I want out of this. Because I wish we could, I was telling Adam, I wish we were born old and went back because of the vast knowledge you acquire, and we all have to make the mistakes. But you know what the real mistakes in life are? Not taking a shot, a calculated risk. I'm not going to get into risk assessment. The people say, I'm too afraid, I'm not going to try it. I'm not going to try it. So we sat at that table, and they liked me, and they said, Stu, we'll give you an exclusive distributorship to sell these posters in New England and the hats, all the Travolta stuff. Nobody knew about it. And I'm thinking, I got them to do this. Maybe I can get the rest of the country. I didn't have a sales force. So I asked my salesman, could you come to the men's room with me? And I went in the men's room. I said, listen, Jim, you're getting a 2% commission on everything I sell. Think how big that commission would be if we had it for all 50 states. We went back to the table. I did a little tap dance on the table. They were laughing. They were hysterical. They said, gee, you're amazing. Do you have a sales force around the country? Remember what I said? The only lie that will ever net you $1 is the lie you don't have. I said, I will in 3 days. It was the truth. I called we didn't have cell phones then. I called my office. I said, Cecile, I'm under the gun. I want you to find the top manufacturers' representatives in the country. I'm going national now. I scheduled flights, 12 cities, 5 days. Presentations at airports. People would gather me. Paramount Pictures, they supplied me all the billboards for Travolta. And I made presentations at airports. And you know what the general comment was from all of the salesmen? This is where you have to be firm in business. Because I had other products that everybody had. I was nothing special. And they said, we'll take Saturday Night Fever. Forget the other stuff. And you know what I said? No, you won't. You take everything or nothing. That's leverage. And I had to use that leverage. And everybody wanted Saturday Night Fever. And all I can tell you, it was an amazing success. But I went to Chicago in what's called the National Houseway Show. The biggest show in the country. We had a 20-inch snowstorm. And Paramount Pictures had sent all these billboards with Andy Gibb singing and John Travolta. And nobody showed up. Almost nobody. I was sick to the pit of my stomach. And one guy showed up and said to me, something walks, but money talks. And he said, I want Saturday Night Fever. Bang. Target, TG&Y, JCPenney. I went absolutely bananas, hiring people, working nights, farming things out. I won't get into the details of how I did it in a cost-effective way, because life is much more productive when you are cost-effective, not being efficient. We're all efficient. We come here, we're supposed to be here at the right time. But yesterday's horse race results don't do you any good today. So if an opportunity comes up today and you've got something planned, you can always change a bus schedule, but you can't change an opportunity that hits you. Please understand that. So I ended up getting it, Saturday Night Fever. It got me national prominence, and it was a roaring success, and it led to a whole lot of other successes. And then something really profound happened. And it got me written up in Newsweek, so I immediately started to get some media connection. Now, here's the part that I talked about being introspective. There's no knock against engineers. I don't have an engineer's personality. I mean, I used to be with somebody in a cubicle doing experiments in physiological psychology, and he went on to get a PhD, and I would say to him, hey, listen, how do you stimulate the dendrites and the axons and the neurons and the extrapyramidal system? And he actually answered me. And then I'd bang the notebook over his head. I wasn't exactly well behaved. You've got to realize what it is that works for you, and don't be pressured. Don't succumb to peer pressure, but also be rather pragmatic. Be real. Don't make big mistakes. They say risk assessment, you can take your risk and reward are equal on either side. No, you can take a risk where the rewards are great, but the losses are small. That's a subject for another day. So then something amazing happened in my career, and this is what I talk about. It's linked. Any questions? No questions? Are you writing them down? All right. And then something really amazing happened. Batman. Batman actually changed my life. Batman did change my life. The Batman craze developed. Here's what I mean about sensing opportunities, having the acumen to respond. I was in the business, I had the setup. And all of a sudden, I knew from a ground roots level that started in the streets of Los Angeles and in England, and I researched this, there was a swelling for Batman. I saw the teaser for the movie. Again, I went a little crazy, but not so crazy that I made a major mistake. I decided to bring first of all, I decided to buy all the Batman paraphernalia from everybody, squeeze bottles, hats, t-shirts, everything. I had 25 different Batman items. It was a huge investment. And then I decided to test them. I called my representative in Detroit. I said, Don, can you get me a test group of stores to put it in? It was called What's New out of Michigan. Put them in 12 stores. They sold out in 24 hours. What do you think I thought? This may not be something. Or did you think I said, this is incredible? It was incredible. I had printed shoelaces, I had the wall walkers, all those crazy fads. When Batman came, all of a sudden I got cast into the national media, and I talk about use the media. You've got social media, you've got Skype, you've got Twitter, you've got LinkedIn, you've got Facebook. There are amazing opportunities out there if you're selective for what you feel can bring you benefits. Batman got me, all of a sudden people knew who I was around the country. They knew it from Saturday Night Fever, but my reputation exploded. I got an interview. I always listened. I used to run 6 miles every Saturday and Sunday morning, and I got a call directly from David Alpern of Newsweek On Air. He was on 100 Years, and it was one of my favorite shows. And he said, Stu, this is David Alpern. He said, we've talked with a lot of people, but I don't think anybody is more articulate on this. Would you come on my show? I said, yeah, I'd love to. And bang, all of a sudden, before I knew it, I was getting TV appearances, many shows. Anybody ever watch Tom Bergeron? He hosts all these game shows, and these the blooper shows. He's been around a long time. He's very successful. Tom Bergeron had me on his show 3 times. He had me on to talk about late night talk show hosts, because then the linkage went into talk radio. I'll explain that in a minute. He had me on to talk about New Kids on the Block. New Kids on the Block landed in my lap, all the paraphernalia, and I ended up marketing it. So he had me on for that, and then he had me on for What's Hot This Summer, because then I got the Ninja Turtles and the Simpsons and all these remarkable licensed products that I figured out how to put together and sell as a distributor. So how do you sell it as a distributor? How do you mark up the price? I don't want to get it, but I just want to give you a little inkling about this. How do I make money? Because stores pay the same as I pay. You just can't get it. It's called supply and demand. As soon as the demand increases and the supply decreases, it's like gasoline, or at least the perception. What happens? The price goes up. I got no deals. Stores, chains had to spend $20,000 for what's called an SKU for each product. I had to spend some serious, serious money. And so how could I possibly sell it? Well, here's how I sold it. The stores had two choices. You got Batman. I mean, well, Batman wasn't quite the same, but I own Batman. Simpsons and Ninja Turtles and New Kids on the Block, you couldn't get it. Oh, do you have it? Yeah, I have it. How much is it going to cost me? Same prices you'd have to pay in a store. Well, why would anybody buy it from me? What's the answer? Anybody know? Yeah, that's one reason, but the other reason is you got two choices. You can either buy it, and I can mark it up, and you can sell it for more than anybody else is selling it, or you don't buy it. It didn't matter because you have to qualify people. Price wasn't the issue. It was getting the product. People would have paid anything for it. You know, when these sneaker things come out, you know, these new Nikes in the stores, they'll pay anything. So it's supply and demand and power. So Batman proved to be hugely successful for me. But you know, I was starting to feel a little unsatisfied and a little burnt out. And you know, you can easily feel burnt out when you take your wife and your two daughters to Nantucket on vacation for a week, and all of a sudden, the craze dies and you're sitting with a warehouse full of merchandise. And stores are calling up, like House of Cards in Atlanta with 50 stores and saying, "Stu, we're canceling our $30,000 or $40,000 order." It's not really the greatest vacation, even though you've made your money. But you have to be careful to know when to get in and when to get out. You have to know how deep you're going to get in life and when you're going to get out. Mistakes are part of life, but keep them small. So Batman really propelled me, but I could almost feel the burning out process beginning because this was a fast business. It was a high-risk business. It was like being in commodities, 3 phones a day. And then I got a call from Newsweek magazine. How would you like to be on the cover of Newsweek? You know, everybody lies in bed, and you may have your own fantasies, but one of my fantasies was, boy, it would be nice to be on the cover of Newsweek. So Newsweek, you can pass this around. I look a little younger. You can just pass it around. And Newsweek called me and said, "We're coming out. Do you have 3 hours for photographs? We're putting it on the cover of Newsweek." I said, "I'll give you 10 hours of photographs." And they came out, and this was ticketed to go on the cover of Newsweek magazine, which, I mean, that would have been a real coup. Because magazines, have, you know, where they've gone, are newspapers now in this new digital age, but back then, I mean, that was like being in paradise. And then 2 days before that was scheduled, a Time AOL story came out. It replaced the Batman story. And they wrote about me in Newsweek, but I wasn't on the cover. It still hurts. You can probably sense it. It still hurts. But things went along, and then I was thinking, gee, I wonder if there are any other opportunities, because you always have to think about other opportunities. So I ended up, you're getting some ideas about connections and how you can use it later on? There aren't specifics we can deal with, because you still got to get through this. But when you get out there, if you can just think about this. I was invited to a New York Times lunch. And who's sitting at the table with me at a New York Times lunch as I'm sitting there? I think I went with my father and my brother. The owner of a major radio network. His name was Tom Starr. I mean, he was, I guess I can say this in a complimentary way, he was an idiot savant if there ever was one. He knew nothing except radio. But my God, did he know radio. And we're sitting talking sports. And at that particular point, I had grown up loving sports. I could really talk about sports on any level. And he said, wow. He said, how do you know so much about sports? I said, listen, it's interesting. And at the same time, a major publisher had come to me based upon all these experiences. And the book I wrote was How to Turn Trends into Fortunes Without Getting Left in the Dust. It was a major publisher. They gave me an advance, which is a big accomplishment back then. It was the 25th largest publisher. I was really excited. But I also could read him. If you interact with someone, you can learn how to read that person. I had an idea what he'd say. He was impressed with me. And he said, gee, you're writing a book. Can I promote your book? I said, well, no, because I've got a major publisher, but I'll do your radio show. And he said, you're coming in tomorrow night, and I'll put you on 400 stations. I was actually excited, but I said, yeah, it sounds good. Don't always show your emotions because you can tip your hat. Keep those emotions in check. So I went in and I did the show, and a lot of astounding experiences. How far into this are we, Adam? I got 3 more hours?
3 more. 3 more hours.
All right. So I did the show, and I started to cultivate relationships, started to save all of these audios. And you know, I remember the first show I did. I was taking my wife and my daughters to Truro, next to Provincetown, for a vacation. I got a call and said, "You're going to interview Jim Ringo." It's rather matter of fact now, but back then it was, wow, Jim Ringo, Hall of Famer for the Green Bay Packers. And I guess you could say, I look back now and think, what kind of a jerk was I? I drove 90 miles back to the studio to do the interview and drove back to the Cape the next day. But I think about it now. It was the excitement of doing it, and all of a sudden it led to all of these opportunities. Do you know that in the first 4 months of doing radio, here's linkage again. It shows you that you may start in a field, but you know, you can connect and go anywhere you want. More so now than ever. Believe me, there were limitations back when I did these things. There aren't limitations now. You have to ask yourself a question. How badly do I want something? I don't care what it is, whether it's graduate school, whether it's a job in a certain area. How much do I want it, and how much am I willing to sacrifice? It's pretty easy, because I assume you all come from good families who provide for you. It should never stifle opportunity and motivation. Ooh, I said I wasn't going to give a motivational speech. I just did. How much do you want something? Because you can do anything you want, and I'm suddenly realizing I can do anything I want. I really can. And I felt that ability to control it. So in the first 6 months, I hosted the Hall of Fame. The first year I didn't. I was like a PA, an assistant. I went to the Hall of Fame in Cooper's. Anybody remember Bill Buckner? The ball went through his legs in the World Series. Remember who he was for the Red Sox? Well, Bill Buckner and I became good friends. And Buckner used to sit and do his shows. A great guy. Then finally he said, "Stu, have you got any questions?" I can't think of any questions. And I write 20 questions out for him. And we became really good friends. And I ended up going to Cooperstown the first year to do the Hall of Fame inductions for baseball. And you know what I did? Buckner was nice enough to say, "I don't feel good, let Stu do it." You know, it was a big thrill. Here I was on all over the country on radio. We were the ones doing radio. But I went out. You have to stay humble, but you have to know when to toot your horn. I went and I got drinks. I went here, I went there. I brought back food. I never felt that I was too big to do anything. I had a young producer who taught me so much about radio. And he was, I always looked at him on the same level, the same way you should look with everyone, because as I tell my producers on radio now, we're all in this together. I'm no good without you. Never look at yourself as better than anyone else, but always look at yourself as having the opportunity to climb as high as life as you want. You can do it. You don't want to find this out at 40 or 50. My wife and I went out to eat last night in Boston. And as we walked into the restaurant, there was an old, I don't know how old he was. He had a beard and he was rummaging through the garbage pail. And right next to him, there was a long limo waiting for some celebrity to step out. My wife said, "Just take a look at the contradiction here. One end to the other. You can do anything you want." So the radio show was great. I did the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. I did the Stanley Cup Finals. I was invited to the Hall of Fame in Canton, New York. And I needed to make an impact. I talk about how to get into the limelight. And Tom Starr said, "I can't put you on radio." I said, "Oh, Tom, I'm begging you, please. You've just got to give me a shot." Sam Huff, who was in the Hall of Fame and played for the Giants, all these great football, he says, "Okay, I'll put you on for 10 minutes with Sam Huff." And I'm sitting there. Just an idea. I don't suggest you be as bold. I was thinking, I've got to make an impression. How can I make an impression? So Sam Huff said to me in this southern drawl, "What do you think, Stu?" I said, "Sam, this reminds me of how great this game is, and it's not just for anybody being in the Hall of Fame. This is a tribute to everyone who's ever donned a football uniform. King Hill, King of the Hill, shuffles a pass to Woody Lewis, and the cards are deep in the Colt Corral. Y.A. Tittle, the balding mentor, makes his NFL debut, and it is Y.A. Tittle hits Dale Schaffner with a 27-yard touchdown pass, and the Giants are resting comfortably on a 27-0 pillow. Len Moore John Unitas hands off to Lenny Moore, and long-legged Lenny lopes in for the score. I haven't said this in a long time, so I had to grasp it. Dick LeBeau makes his NFL debut, and it is indeed an auspicious one, as the 90-yard passes picked off for a 90-yard rocket ride. I started to come up with all these alliterations. And Sam Huff turned to me and he said, "What the hell was that all about?" What it was about, Sam, was for me to get the spotlight when I had the chance. You know how you talk about your 15 seconds? Tom Starr said to me, "How did you ever do that?" He said, I'm giving you a show in great hours. You got to have confidence. You have to step up. But you have to know you can deliver the goods. I was just on, I don't know if you've seen the video on negotiation that I did on MSNBC. When you have the chance and you're in control to negotiate, you can negotiate a lot better than when you're not in control. How many cards are you holding? You know, you feel confident if you got a relationship with your boyfriend or your girlfriend and you feel you're in control. We all have those instinctive moves. You know, you can get away a little more in how your behavior is because you know you're not going to lose the person. It's the same thing for business or life. Well, I had the good fortune to come up with an idea. I ended up doing business shows, and then I ended up going to Washington and broadcast out of the White House during the Clinton administration on healthcare reform on the North Lawn. I have all my videos, everything that I've all used. I put everything up on most things up, but I can't put everything up. There's too much. If you go to my website, you'll see how to use promotion and publicity to help yourself. I ended up being at the Capitol building for the 104th Congress, interviewing all the senators, and who got the write-ups? He wasn't charging me, by the way, to come on radio. He was charging everyone else. And I went out while everyone was doing the interviews with the congressmen, and all the newspapers, Reuters, the Washington Post, the New York Times, they all came and said, "Stu, what do you think about health care reform?" And I went on a diatribe, and when the newspapers came out, he was furious with me, and my name was all over the newspapers. He said, "These people are paying me money. I'm putting you on for nothing, and all the write-up is on you." I said, "Tom, the opportunity was there. You didn't tell me don't do it." And all of this publicity generates into something that becomes self-perpetuating. And not only can you create an image, an idea of who you are, but if you walk the walk, if you do the talk, you've got to walk the walk. You've got to be able to produce. So make sure if you stick your neck out and you do something, you can produce. Does anybody know who Rico Petrocelli is? Played with the Red Sox, 13 years, 5 All-Star games, 2 World Series, Red Sox Hall of Fame. He's a legend. Rico and I were broadcasting on Tom's show. We became great friends. And there was an article in the newspaper, again, other opportunities about a company called Liberty Sports out of Irving, Texas, looking for a morning drive team. They had 54 stations around the country, but they wanted a test team, and all the radio talk show hosts came out to interview for the job. Rico and I went for an interview in Boston. And I made sure that I got into one hell of an argument with him. And the guy who was interviewing us said, "Stop." He says, "This is fantastic." He says, "You guys are hired." And I remember Rico inviting me, Rico and his lovely wife, Elsie, invited my wife and I for dinner. Morning drive, 6 to 9 in Boston, out of Constitution Wharf, like $1 million facility. Our names were on the back of 1,000 buses. It was exciting. Stu Taylor and Rico Petrocelli, the home team. We were off and running. And he said, "Can you negotiate a better price?" I called up, and the guys who own the network said, "Stu, you've pushed this far enough. If you ask for any more money, we're going to get another team." I said, "Rico, I can't do it." I gave it my shot. Take the deal. We took the deal. We became very successful. But like everything else in life, you know, everything is great, and all of a sudden you find out it's not that great. Does that happen to you? You couldn't hear the signal too well in Boston. Everybody was listening to EEI. You could barely hear. Here we are, a major team on 5 days a week. I got to tell you, if I'm bragging, I guess I am, it was a great sports show. The chemistry was unbelievable with us. It was, you dream of a relationship like that. We couldn't hear the signal. So the company was losing money. Now, here's one of the things that happens in life, and I'll tell you what happened. They had a choice to make. They were going to close down. They had to fire somebody. Guess who they fired? Me. Why would they fire Rico Petrocelli? He was the big name, and I remember going by and listening in the office, and Rico was furious, and they had a cut budget, and they had to do it. And at the time, listen, it hurt. It hurts to get rejected. But you couldn't hear the signal. They brought in some young guy. They closed down in 3 months. and they went bankrupt in all of their stations around the country. Why would you spend all of that money and not be able to hear the show? So we went on, we did our own show, and we ended up getting a contract from Dunkin' Donuts. We went around to many Dunkin' Donuts and did shows. We're still great friends today. But one day, an interesting thing happened. Enrico said, I think we're going to move on from the show. Thank you for coming. He said, I think we're going to have to move on. I'm going to move. I said, Rico, he said, we're going to have to negotiate a contract with Dunkin' Donuts. I said, well, I can't do this on the phone. You know, he was the celebrity. I was the guy who put it together. We were a great team. I said, Rico, we're going to have to go into Dunkin' Donuts. We sat down at Dunkin' Donuts, and they said, I thought they were going to throw us out. He was asking for so much. He said, I don't want to do all these personal, you know, his schedule was much busier than mine, and he's one of the nicest people you'd ever want to meet in your life. And when you think of sports celebrities being spoiled and arrogant, he was as down to earth and as generous and as giving he is. He's a wonderful human being. They came back and he said, we'll give you this deal if you stay with us for 18 months. And I very calmly said, thank you very much. I went out in the car and I said something that probably I won't say here. I shook hands and I said, Rico, you were right and I was wrong. And then shortly down the line, Rico decided to leave. And I had a decision to make. I had purchased time on 2 radio shows. I had met a gentleman in Florida, and he handled public, linkage, connecting, how do you expand your horizons? I'd met a gentleman in Florida, and he was here having lunch with myself and a business partner, and he said, you know, I've got business clients, and I always thought, how can I ever take my radio show and adapt it to make money from businesses? 98% of people who buy time, you lose money. It's expensive on major networks. It's tough to sell. The market's difficult. He said, if I give you clients and pay you so much, I said, well, I have the equipment. I can do it. So I ended up calling Business Talk Radio I'm still with them 14 years later, out of Connecticut. They gave me a slot. I couldn't handle all the clients. I called Radio America at the time out of Washington. They gave me a slot. And because Rico left this sports show, I converted it into a business show, and I created a business model where I buy time and sell it, and then I bring on Jack Welch, Steve Forbes, Newt King. They're all on here, all on my website. All these celebrities who personally endorsed me. At that time, after the radio thing started to evolve, a gentleman came to me and said, I'm buying time for 5 different shows, and I'd like you to do them, 2 of them. One was to do a sports show called Circle the Bases with former Red Sox pitcher Dick Raditz, greatest reliever the Red Sox ever had. He died about 5 years ago. Weighed about 300 pounds. He was brilliant. And then, this is interesting, because this was a further expansion and promotion of what I had done. Any of you boxing fans? Oh, good. None of this will mean anything. But there is a Jewish boxing champion. It's kind of an oxymoron. You don't think of Jewish fighters. Dangerous Dana Rosenblatt, 3-time world boxing champion, who won 37 fights and beat some big names, but since you're not boxing fans, I won't mention them. He had beaten all the major fighters out there that he fought, and he became ranked 4th in the world. It's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing for a guy who didn't have the physical assets, but was smart today. I introduced him to my real estate attorney. He hooked up with a mortgage company. He became Countrywide's #1 salesman after he retired. Got married, had 2 kids. And he always looked at me, other than his father, as his mentor in life. But I was doing a sports show called Circle the Bases. Called In This Corner. Don King, Sugar Ray Leonard, everybody would come on. And the next thing I know, Dana is a guest on my show, and I insulted him on radio. When he lost 1 fight. It was a fluke punch. Vinny Pazienza had a broken eye socket and a broken nose. Never touched Dana Rosenblatt. And then the left hook came out of nowhere. Dana went down. He later won the fight and avenged the championship. I was told that Dana was going to come in and do the fights with me. But I had insulted him on radio. I did it to be controversial when I was doing the show with Rico. And then I went to a fight in Boston where he fought a #10 fighter in the world. And he broke his hand in the first round, and he won the fight with one hand. I never knew it, and I didn't know he broke his hand. George Kimball, the late writer for the Boston Herald, says he broke his hand. I said, did he, George? And I'm walking out, I said, Dana, listen, congratulations, I'm Stu Taylor, we're going to be doing radio. And he gives me a dirty look and walks out. I said, oh boy, he's really ticked off. He wasn't ticked off, broke his hand. The next thing I know, Dana Rosenblatt is my partner for an equally fabulous show, and a wonderful, I mean, just a bright, good-looking, smart, talented kid. And it was like magic. We were like magic together. So he gets a call because he's internationally known. He gets a call when I'm sitting there after one of our shows, and somebody out at the Springfield Convention Center says, I'd like you to do the color for 2 world championship fights, Jose Antonio Rivera and Pito Cardona. And Dana says, who's doing the blow-by-blow? He says, we're bringing in a guy. He says, I'm not doing it unless Stu Taylor does it. He says, can he do boxing? He says, Stu does everything. At the time, George Foreman, who wrote the foreword for my book, had hired me to promote a fight in Atlantic City for him. This is how the tentacles reach out. All the things you can do. With me, it happened to be media and speaking engagements. So we went out to the Springfield Convention Center. I was exhausted. I had no sleep. I was going back and forth from Atlantic City to here, put on the tuxedos, and we had never done a professional fight ever. But I've worked with production crews, and there are people who have attitudes, and I said to myself, I can't afford to have somebody with an attitude. I'm doing this for the first time, and I'm getting it professionally produced. So I walked in with my tuxedo, Springfield Convention Center with Dana, and I said, don't say anything. And I said, who's in charge of production? The guy says, I am. I said, take those lights and move them 3 inches to the right. Dana says, what's that all about? I says, that's so nobody's going to give us trouble. It's enough doing our first fight. So we did the first fight. It's on my website if you can stand it. We had never done a fight. And then I got demos made. See, how to think. How to think not like in a football field. The good athletes think horizontally. The really bright ones think horizontally and vertically. They think both ways. You've got to open your mind to all the possibilities, examine all the options. It's called exit strategy in business. How do I get out of this if it doesn't work? You may think, how can I get out of this exam if it doesn't work? I used to think about that too, and it didn't work because my teachers were a little smarter than I was, and they nailed me good. That's when I decided to really gather the knowledge. So we did the fight, I got it produced, and I immediately contacted all of the networks. All of a sudden I get a call from DirecTV. Mr. Taylor, we saw your fight. We'd like you to do the worldwide championship broadcast of Cool Vince Phillips and Mickey Ward. You know Mickey Ward, the fighter? Well, Mickey was a friend of mine. Mickey, I haven't seen him in a long time. And we got hired to do the fight next to Dan Dierdorf for CBS, and it went to 35 countries. But I said, I'd like Dana to be my color guy, you know, the one who analyzes it. We don't need him. We only need one. I said, I'm asking you, please bring Dana in to do this with me. And I could only push it one more time because Dana did me that favor. You know, it's called payback. I wanted to do this with him. And finally they said, and I'm ready to ask you your first question here, so start thinking. They said, we'll only pay him half of what we're paying you. I said, deal. I called Dana. I said, guess what, my friend? He calls everyone fella. I says, you know what, fella? We just got a gig with DirecTV. And guess what? They're paying me twice as much as you. I said, but we're going to split it. Now, I want to ask somebody for an opinion. Do you think I asked them for 2 different checks? Or do you think I asked them to leverage it and give us the same? What do you think I did? Somebody. I kept the original price, yeah. Why didn't I lower it and then just split it? Do you know why?
You don't want to show them anything?
What does it make me look like? That I worked for less than what the price they quoted me was? So I took it out of my end and gave it to Dana. Perception. Perception is often reality. You don't want to devalue yourself. You know, 99-cent stores sell products for 99 cents. That's what they do. Every store has an identity. But once you start discounting value, it really doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. So we did the fight. It was a big success, and before we know it, we got hired by Fox. It was called Mohegan Sun Fight Night in New England. We did 35 professional fights together. What fun. I didn't even care about the money. I mean, the money wasn't enough for me. And then we got hired by Joe DeGuardia out of New York. He said, will you two guys come to New York? We go down to the Bronx, we go down to Queens. We do all these professional fights that were televised up and down the East Coast. I have to tell you, it was a kick. It was really a kick, and if we had more time, I could tell you some funny boxing stories, but since nobody follows boxing, they may not be funny. Like the time I went to Scranton, Pennsylvania. He couldn't go. His wife wouldn't let him go because he had just won at Foxwoods. And I'm doing a fight, and there was a fighter in the ring who got knocked through the ropes in the first round. You know, I've got all my equipment there, and he's lying there bleeding. I have my tuxedo on. I told the cameras to come over and follow the interview. Heartless, aren't I? Aren't I heartless to have done that? He was alive, and he could barely talk, but he talked until the medics came over. But I got an interview out of him. These are some of the things you have to do in the media. I did the 1992 All-Star game in Chicago, the Stanley Cup Finals. I ran down 5 flights of stairs in Chicago Arena after the fans, you learn things, threatened to throw me over because you can't stand up in front of people in Chicago unless it's between periods. Boy, did they threaten me. I ran downstairs, and Tom Barrasso was the goalie, and CBS was there, and NBC. And you know what I did? Pardon me. I just walked right in front of him and stuck the microphone in Tom Barrasso's face, and I did the interview, and I ran up 4 flights with it. It's been done to me. That's how I learned. It's been done by, can't think of her name, but I was interviewing Red Auerbach. It was Dick Stockton's wife, who's, you know who I'm talking about. She's tough, but she shoved that mic right in front of me, and this is what you have to do if you're in the media. So all of this led to a wonderful career. The last fight I did was about 5 years ago. The Mohegan Sun asked me to come down. Joe DeGuardia said, can you do a fight? I said, Joe, can you pay me more? He says, I can't. I said, I'll do it as a favor. And I drove down to the Mohegan Sun, and that was my last fight. Because I decided to move on, because I've created this little business show where I'm now in 90 cities, on 4 networks, 5 shows. I buy time and I resell it. I don't think anybody's going to knock me off, so I can tell you what my theory is. I buy time and I resell it. I sell advertising and interviews to companies who spend so much money a month to get interviews, and they go on all the networks. We've just added a brand new network. It's called the UR Business Network. For those who are so darn archaic that they just can't jump into all of this social media stuff. You know, it's great for you, but you know, I have to say to my wife all the time, how do I do this? How do I do that? Make sure you have someone who can do it if you can't. She says, Stu, I've only told you 100 times. I said, that's not how my mind functions. But the UR Business Network, you can Google it. urbusinessnetwork.com is an ongoing high-powered internet network that will link to thousands and thousands of sources. And you know, they have brought me in as probably their principal person. You know, what am I supplying to them? Content. They want me for my content to draw my other shows. But then I thought, you know, these shows are B2B, you know, business to business. How do I go business to B2C, business to consumer? Well, I have to draw a consumer crowd. So I interview all of these other people. And I have contracts with publishing companies who I charge authors a certain amount to come on. I have contracts with mining companies I'll be off to, as I told Adam, which is why I have to apologize for not being here in March. I'm going to have to go to Toronto Saturday. I'm involved with a lot of mining companies. And I built this little business model. But you know, I'm always thinking, what's next? So somebody might say to me, and this is where you have to look at your goals and ambitions in life. Where do you want to be in 10 years? Now, I'm not an old guy, but I'm an older guy. And I generally say alive. I want to be alive in 10 years. It's only because of where you are that you have to make decisions where you want to go and how much you want to. I've had opportunities. I've had some really interesting opportunities. People coming to me and say, hey, listen, if you give me some radio time, I'll give you all this training on speaking. And I said, look, I'm not bragging to you about whether I'm a good, I could become a much better speaker. I said, I am what I am. I'm getting speaking engagements everywhere. I put on these conferences in New York. I have one in April, investment conferences in New York, where I go down for mining and energy conferences, and I'm the MC. And then if you go to my site, if you're interested, here's what I mean about linkage. Linkage. Make one thing do everything for you. So if you go to my site and look at videos and scroll down, you'll see about 50 interviews. Some of them are on tax reform, keynote speeches, speaking at universities. But know what the danger zones are and how to stay out of them. In 2008, I was in Nantucket. And I got a call from Dr. Larry Kotlikoff, who's a well-known professor at Boston University in the School of Economics. Worked for 2 presidential administrations. I don't want to talk politics, but there are people who are brilliant economists who can't figure anything out, like Paul Krugman of the New York Times. It's brilliant, and everything he says is wrong. Anybody know who Paul Krugman is? He's wrong. He's wrong about everything, but he's brilliant. So I get a call, and I'm in Nantucket, and I'm doing my radio show. I said, I don't want to know what's going on anywhere because I'm down here for vacation. We go to this great place, the Century House. It's the oldest B&B down here. We have a great time every year. I said to my wife, I'm not looking at television. I'm not looking at a newspaper. I'm just going to go on air. So I go on air one morning, and the market collapsed. Any of you old enough to remember what happened? I got to tell you. When you're heavily invested in the market, it's like a dagger going through your heart. I didn't know it because I wouldn't look at any newspapers. You know what I do every morning before I go on the air? I'm on Monday through Friday, 11 to noon. If you listen, it'll give me another couple of listeners. 11:20 a.m., 1390. Barry Armstrong, who's simulcast on RKO, precedes me. Anybody know who Michael Graham is? Conservative radio talk show host. He's on after me for 3 hours. It's like David Ortiz in the lineup. You've got to have people in back of you and ahead of you. So my audience is going to increase. So I do the show and I go on and I know from nothing. And I'm interviewing, I don't know who his name was. He was an ABC reporter out of some international event from England. He says, my God, what happened to the market? And I said, what happened? He said, you didn't hear, and here I am on radio. It crashed. I get a call I'm in Nantucket a couple of days later from Larry Kotlikoff, whom I had interviewed on my show. Whom, not who. Whom I have interviewed. And he said to me, Stu, would you be willing to come to the Boston University School of Economics to talk about the economic disaster and how it occurred? And I said, what did I say? Yes! And then I hung up, and my wife said to me, are you crazy? He's in a famous, how you can't, you've got to say no to that. I said, no. I said yes. And she said, well, you're going to have to clarify this. So I called him back. I said, Larry, can I just qualify one thing? See, I'm a macro guy, not a micro guy. You have to decide in life whether you want to be a generalist or a specialist. You make the decision. If you're a generalist, how do you sell yourself? If you're a specialist, you can, but is there a market if you're a specialist? And you can't. There are a lot of people who have law. I know one, somebody who married a daughter of a friend of mine, brilliant lawyer. A year he can't get a job. So you need to be prepared to be a generalist. But I'm a generalist. Give me a subject. We'll go around the table for 3 hours and I'll talk about it for 10 minutes. But the specialist can make. So I called him back and said, Larry, I just want to say one thing before I go to BU. And what I want to say is that you have to structure the title to say that this is what happened to the economy from an entrepreneur's standpoint. I'm not going to get into GDP and I can talk about that, and I talk about it with. I've talked about it with everybody you see on MSNBC and CNBC and Bloomberg. All these people have been guests on my show. I can give you names; they may not mean anything. Diane Swank, all these famous people, and I can carry on the conversation. But really, what's happening is that most people don't know a lot about anything. And I'm going to take a whack at the Republicans and the Democrats. How many people read that health care bill? Nobody. Nancy Pelosi says, let's pass it and then we'll read it. That's the case of almost everything that we're dealing with. So you're in a very susceptible environment. And I don't want to be, you can take this and turn it to your advantage. I always talk about how do you take disadvantages and turn them into advantages. You have to have a plan. And you can develop that plan and modify it and change it. And if you graduate here and you make a, quote, mistake, a mistake is never trying, and you don't like the job you're in, you got another job. I shouldn't use this, but it's an example. If somebody comes to you and says you got terminal cancer, you don't have many choices. You got to live with it. It's not the end of the world. There should be nothing that should be catastrophic. are of such a huge issue that it will destroy your lives if you don't choose the right course when you get out of here. So, are we ready for Q&As?
2 minutes.
All right, 2 minutes. See, I guess it's from doing radio. It's like a clock built in. So in the final 2 minutes here, what I want to say is be aware of trending times and use yourself to navigate the waters, even where I am. For example, I just did an interview with a guy who's a big PR guy, who is an agent for a lot of people. I have people say, do you have an agent? How do you get your speaking engagements and your book? I get them on my own. I'm really, in a sense, from the old school when I had my business. Nobody ever wrote a check but me. It's not good, but it's worked for me because you have to understand who you are. And the kinds of things you do in life are heavily predicated on what your personality is. And I'm not likely to, my brother's always saying to me, he's a brilliant professor who taught his Stu, you can do, he says, Jay, I love you. I'm not interested. When somebody says to you, I don't have time, you know what the real meaning is? It means I choose not to have the time. Believe me, if I said to you, hey, listen, I'm going to put you on a plane to Las Vegas right now. I guarantee I'll put it in writing. You're going to come back with $20,000 in your pocket. It's legitimate. You're going to tell me you don't have the time. You're going to change your schedule. So you have to look at these opportunities that are out there. You have to seize upon these opportunities that are out there. I'm still looking at opportunities. When George Foreman invited me to promote his fight with Lou Savarese, and that's a whole story in itself. If you invite me back, I'd like to tell, can you make a note? I'd love to tell that story. Oh, I'd love to tell that story, and if there are no questions, I'll be forced to. George Foreman, when I was at his press conference at Atlantic City at Bally's, I said, George, you just keep going and going and going. He says, I'm not ready to have them seal me in a coffin and slam the lid shut. I'm as vibrant and as energized as ever. When I do these investment conferences in New York, it's a 13-hour day. I don't even think about the money or anything. I don't think about that. I'm there to fulfill my obligation and not to disappoint and to produce. If someone puts trust in you to do something, you perform. Not only do I host the event, and I hosted it with a terrible cough, I had cough drops, orange juice, cocoa, and cough medicine. I had the cough that would never go away. You know those coughs? You'll see my interviews if you really want to look at it. It's the last conference, the High Alpha Mining Conference. And I hosted the whole conference, 13 hours, did an opening speech on the mining business and the energy business, and then ran back and forth to a room where they had video set up, and I do spontaneous 8-minute interviews with companies. You think I was stupid to do that? Now, why would I do that when it wasn't originally part of the deal? They keep inviting me back. Oh, these people I interview, they're now potential clients of mine. And because I host these conferences, Perception, I host them at the Essex House and the Metropolitan Club, the old JP Morgan. Sounds good, doesn't it? I mean, it actually is, but use what you can use without distorting, without lying. If you can't answer a question and there's somebody's got you, you know what, I don't answer the question. Or I would say that's personal information. You know how you feel pressed in a phone conversation to say something? If somebody asks you a question and you feel you're being pressured for an answer, don't ever feel pressure to give an answer that cannot be to your benefit. I could keep going, but we've gone through the 2 minutes. So now you have to realize the position that I'm in. I've just stood here for 40 minutes, and I've talked and I enjoyed it, and I'd love to stand here for another 3 hours because I'll be really, really unhappy if somebody didn't get something out of this. So you now have the obligation to me. I don't want any money from you. I don't want any adulation from you. I want to see if what I've said has registered enough with you so that you may have questions. It could be on anything: public relations, communications, network, marketing, collaboration, radio, sport. I don't care. Ask me how my family is. But I can't walk out of here without questions. What's your name?
Kelsey.
Kelsey.
Can you talk to us more about partnerships? You said they're not bad.
Yeah, partnerships, and I said that in the negotiation talk, about when you should come forward with the first dollar in a negotiation. I don't know if anybody see that video? All right, Adam can send it to you. But the answer is both. It's yes and no. Yes, if you're in firm control, you understand what their value proposition and what the other person wants, you know you're in control of the situation, you can come up with the price. Same thing with partnerships. They're good and they're bad. They're good because if I'm a marketing guy and a promotional guy, and you're a lady who has tremendous abilities in accounting and organization, it's a great partnership. You know, I wasn't going to mention this, but you know, the best partnership I have in my life is with my beautiful wife. She's beautiful and brilliant, and we are just polar opposites. The first day when I met her, and she actually went to work for me. She's brilliant and beautiful, and when she went to work for me, she moved here from Michigan after getting a degree in sociology and was going to go on. I met her, as it's a story. But we went in, and I said, you know, you want to work for me? And I said, you're going to have to pick up, she wouldn't pick up the phone. I said, you can't, boy, did she learn. She learned everything, but all of her skills complemented my skills. They still do to this day. She's everything I'm not. I mean, you'd think I were a raving idiot if you saw me, you know, I've got a problem with this. Hey, can you fix this in the house? The heat just, I can't do anything. Am I proud of it? No, but maybe I'm just smart because she makes great meals and I can't cook, so I'm the recipient. But I reciprocate in the ways that I can. So partnerships are good. You got to, you know, people do business with people they know, they like, and they trust. So number one, you got to make sure you know, you like, and you trust that person. If you don't, the equation doesn't work. Number two, they have to, or he or she has to bring something to the table that you don't. If we're both experts in promotion or marketing, tell me what this other person adds, and I'll tell you what that person subtracts. That person subtracts income because it's now half of what you'll be making that you'll have to give to someone who can't bring anything to the table. Partnerships work when you both have an enthusiasm for the business. Or perhaps a partnership works when you need money. And this person happens to come from a wealthy family, and you don't want to go to a venture capitalist, an angel investor, or an institution won't give you money because you can't get money if you go to a bank today. I'll talk about that in the next talk. You can't get money. Mortgages can be at 3.75%, but what good is it if you can't get it? I can buy an item for $1, and I think I'll sell it for $100. It's great, except there'll be no buyers. So that person has to say, listen, you know, I know you can't get money, and we need $30,000 to fund this. My father will loan us the money at a very low interest rate. There's a need for the partnership. There's a need for the partnership if you have a skill in one area and that person has a skill in the other. But to do it because you like each other, because you're friends, it's a mistake because you'll find out how fast friendship can disappear. When you start, it's like any relationship. You got to learn to live with the other person. If you're married, Adam, you know, you're married, right? You're still looking to, you know, you still have to work things out. You have to find out what the other person wants. Always find out about what the other person wants and talk about, you know, that. So be very careful. Partnership shouldn't be a last resort, but it's not your first resort. Next. Your name is?
Olga.
Olga.
So you mentioned it's very important to to find a mentor. As a mentor, what would be the first three things that you would make sure your mentee knows before seizing on any business opportunity?
What would I want in a mentor? Is it?
As a mentor, what would you like? What would be the first three things you would make sure your mentee is aware of before?
What my mentor is aware of me?
Yeah.
All right. Well, the first thing, and I've already mentioned a couple of them here. The first thing, and I know this sounds rather altruistic, but I really would want to make sure that this person has had a rather altruistic existence. So I would first dig deep. You know what I always tell people? You know, I talk fast, but I don't have to worry about covering up anything. I'm not covering up any lies. It's so tough to cover up lies. So the first thing you want to do, and what I tell people, if I sense there's some skepticism, if they say to me, are you from New York? There's a certain association I make with being from New York. New Yorkers tend to talk fast, and that's the general perception. So that's a hint, that's a clue. So I will say, you know, and by the way, I want you to check me out on the website. I'd like you to Google, see if you can find anything bad about me. I would make sure that your mentor has got an exemplary background, because I don't know what the percentage is out there, but boy, there are a lot of fraudulent activities going on out there, and a lot of it is created by the desperation in our society. which is heading towards an entitlement society, and you don't want to be involved in an entitlement society where you just lose your incentive and you don't have any desire to go out and do it on your own. It's something really great when you do it on your own, isn't it? So you want to make sure your mentor is an exemplary person. You want to make sure that your mentor has a background that's commensurate with the needs that you need filled. So for example, if I want to start a business and I want to produce widgets, why would I go to a tennis pro for a mentor? It wouldn't be my first choice. I try to narrow the gap to make sure that it matches up with the needs that I have. It's about corresponding needs so that our needs are the same. My great mentor was my father. And a gentleman who's since passed on, and that's a whole 40-minute talk on him. He was brilliant. He was, I think of the things he used to say, and he died 15, 14 years ago. And what he said 14 or 15 years about what's happening in society, it's amazing. It's as if he had a crystal ball. So you have to be able to, you got to get that feeling. If you meet someone and you're really attracted to that person, this is a different kind of kick. I like what this person says, I like what this person does, and I feel that there's some kind of a mix. And make sure that person has enough interest in you, so that if you're talking to that person, he doesn't pick up his cell phone or her cell phone and start doing other things. You have to have an interest, but that person you want to make sure has a real interest in you, because if you sense that the interest is only passing, it's best to not have it. I coined my own, it's very tough to come up with your own sayings, but people talk about relationships and gee, I'm alone, I wish I could find someone. Here is the worst, and this is my own, okay? I didn't copy this, you can check it out. Whether it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend or anybody in life, it's better to be alone than alone with someone else. I know people locked in terrible business relationships and terrible marriages, and the loneliness is just it's unbelievable. So you can't give in to your emotions. Is that it? Any other questions? The final 10 questions.
You said keep your cards, don't show all your cards when negotiating with people.
Yeah.
But how do you deal with negotiating good faith then?
You negotiate in good faith by offering a value proposition to someone. So you operate in good faith. If you're in a negotiation, and I think I use this, I hate to use the same thing I just used on MSNBC, J.J. Ramberg, Your Business. But if I'm sitting dealing with someone, and I sense that I can't quite close the deal because what will confiscate a lot of negotiations is not the substance often. Some people are in it for power. Some people are in it just it's a game. What is somebody in it for? People think a negotiation is firmly rooted in money. It isn't. So I might say, if I sense I'm really getting nowhere with this person, two things, and I'll make this quick. If I know that this person doesn't have much time and has to pick up his wife or somebody at the airport, and I said, where's the airport? And it's right. I said, I live near there. I'd be happy to pick her up for you. Or I might give a gesture of goodwill or good faith and give them something. I always offer more in a negotiation that people expect. So I would come in and make it really enticing. And if the negotiation doesn't work out well, you know what I'll say? And I know it's going nowhere. Look, I really appreciate the time. You never walk out of a negotiation if you want something. Let's think about this for 3 weeks. Let's come back to the table. I'm going to think about other things that I can give to you. It's about value. You have to provide value above what the perception initially would be. That's called value added. That's how you get around that, and that's how you overcome that obstacle. One more, two more, three more? I didn't make any other plans for this afternoon. Does anybody have any questions?